So by now we understand why we want to invest in real estate. We have our reasons in investing in real estate. We have the plan. So now we're entering new territory basically. We're entering the real estate ecosystem where there are players and all of them have incentives. There are teams around, there are certain dynamics. So how can we navigate this real estate ecosystem as we're starting out? This is what we're going to discuss in this video. So as we previously discussed that as an investor, we need to look at three parts when we're planning to invest in something, a certain asset, or enter a new environment in order to maximize our profits. We need to look at the business, basically the ecosystem revolving around that asset. Who are the players? What are the incentives? What are the dynamics and all that? Then we need to have the knowledge, which is understanding how everything works. And then we need to have the tools basically to put our plan into action. So in this video particularly, we're going to be discussing about the business, basically the business of real estate. As this is the real estate investing series, we're going to be talking about the business, basically look at the ecosystem, the environment, and I'm going to tell you how you can best navigate this environment based on my experience. So without further ado, let's get started. So the real estate ecosystem, we have 8 players in the real estate ecosystem. The investor being you entering this ecosystem to invest. How can you navigate yourself between all the other players, being the seller, which a person who wants to sell a property, the brokers who connect the investor and the seller, the legal, which watch over all these players basically to ensure everything is legal, the tenant who wants to basically rent the place, most probably from an investor, the marketer who wants to market and benefit from this ecosystem basically, and the developer who develops the real estate, and also we have the property manager who manages the property or real estate. So the real estate ecosystem, any ecosystem, as an investor, when you enter the ecosystem as the first time, you need to ask 3 main questions. The 3 main questions are: what are the incentives? What are the incentives of each player in the ecosystem? And what are the teams involved? I'm going to go into details about the teams. And also, what's the overall dynamics of the system? How does the ecosystem basically, how does everything move? How does money flow in this ecosystem? Understanding these 3 and answering these 3 questions basically will maximize your return on investment and your profits you're going to make. So let's get started with incentives. The incentive to an investor, you as an investor, what's your incentive? You want to buy something at a lower price, basically real estate at a lower price. And you want to make higher return on your investment, basically make money off of that real estate, right? So what is the seller's incentive? The seller's incentive is to sell at a higher price. What is the broker's incentive? The broker wants more referrals and needs to sell basically the properties looking after at a higher price, because the higher the price, the higher the commission. He gets a percentage of that, right? So he has certain incentives that moves him around this ecosystem. And this is highly related to how the teams are formed basically. So what is the legal authorities' incentive? Is basically to regulate the whole ecosystem. The tenant wants to buy a suitable property at the best price, at somewhere best location, close to his job or something like that. And the property managers want to manage more property, because the more property they manage, the more percentage they get from the income of that property. The marketers want people to buy, because most probably the marketer, including the digital agencies and the social media influencers, basically they have contracts with brokers or property managers telling them, okay, I'm going to sell some properties, but you give me a part of the commission you're going to receive. That's a deal that happens within the ecosystem. And the developer basically wants to develop real estate and sell all the properties that they have developed. So as you can see, everyone has their own incentives. And if you notice here as well, all the incentives are around money, cash. Either basically it's all about increasing their ROI, the return on investment, increasing the amount of money they get. There's 2 theories actually, where people look in any ecosystem, people look into either the economical value or economical and social value. But what we're considering here is the economical value only, which means the financial value that people get as a party in the ecosystem. So let's go into the teams now. I've split it into 2 parts, basically the macro teams and the micro teams. The macro teams meaning here are the individuals on the left, and on the left, if you see, there are the individuals, basically the investor, the tenant, the seller. There are certain individuals that have capital aside that want a product or a service. I'm looking at it as a business point of view, basically. They want a product or a service, and there are companies on the right side here, which have expenses. Keep in mind, this is very important. They have expenses, they have licensing, they have expenses, they have marketing expenses, they have table, they have human resource, they have salaries. So over here, the incentives as a macro, based on the individual, is to get a good price, a good product, and a good service. Something that suits that, some good price that suits that value they're going to get through the product or service, right? But these guys have certain KPIs that should be met. Basically, as a business, if you look at these parts, as the broker business, property managers, developers, they have put initial capital in order to start that business, right? And they have annual expenses to run that business, operation costs, basically, right? So then you have certain metrics, say certain KPIs that should be met in order for the business to keep running. So that puts a kind of pressure on these guys to push the products and service on the other side, which is the individuals, the investor, the tenant, or the seller. So keep that in mind. It's very important when you're navigating through the real estate ecosystem that, okay, if someone is pushing something on me, he has a need, a pressure from above to do that, because he wants to sell in order to meet certain metrics that they have in the company to run that company. So where it gets interesting, if we look at the micro teams here. The micro team is basically what are the teams involved between each of these parties. So the seller has a seller's broker. He has a broker, right? And a buyer or investor has his own broker, right? So what happens? Let's just take this loop over here, this relationship over here. The seller has a certain property that he wants to sell. He tells his broker, okay, I want to sell this property for a certain price. But you put it on the market for a higher price. I don't mind if you put it in for a higher price, because if you can get a higher price for me, that's great. The broker says, okay. And the investor tells his broker, basically, I want to buy a property for 50,000, let's say. But start with a lower price, because I don't want them to know. It's basically negotiating the price. They have certain prices that, okay, seals the deal, but they're not going to say that price up front. So what happens is here the seller thinks, okay, I have a seller broker. I am in a team with my broker. And the investor thinks, okay, I'm in a team with my broker. But what's actually happening that no one talks about is that the investor broker and the seller's broker are a team by themselves. So they talk, and they're in the industry, basically, right? This is a business. As we said, this is like a business. Everyone wants to maximize their economical value and maximize the profit they get through the business, right? So what happens here is that the seller goes and tells the other broker, the seller broker goes and tells the other broker is, okay, this seller will sell for 50,000, but he said he wants to put it on market for 70,000, but he's okay with 50,000. The buyer broker says, okay, the buyer is okay with 60,000, but he's saying I need to sell for a lower price, which is 50,000. So what seals the deal here is 50,000, because they want to maximize the profit. Remember their incentive: the higher the price they sell it, the more commission they get. So what happens is these two talk and negotiate and basically try to push the price as much as possible in order for them to get the commission that they need to get. And these guys have no idea that these guys are a team. So that's a typical common relationship in a micro team in the real estate ecosystem to keep in mind when you're investing in real estate. And also the same applies for the tenant, the property manager. These guys are basically in the business. They have costs, they have license, they have expenses. So as I said, they want to maximize their profits, and they have certain metrics that should be met each year. So that's why they kind of have teams and work together in order to maximize that profit. Something new that came out is the social media influencers. If you notice, they keep on talking about real estate. Buy this real estate. Buy this real estate. It's amazing. most of the time they have no idea what they're talking about. I'm being really honest here. They have no idea what they're talking about, and they write add at the bottom, but they're trying to maximize as well. They saw economical value in what's happening here, and they tried to maximize. They said, okay, I'll go talk to these guys, the brokers or the property manager, look at the properties they cannot sell or have been out for selling for quite a long time, and tell them, okay, I'm going to try to push it on my audience. And if I push it on my audience, I get a percentage from you, okay? So what his incentive is to maximize economical value. So, and get his profit out of this ecosystem, as he saw a pain or a need where they cannot sell their properties. So this is kind of the dynamics. If you notice here, there are teams involved, there are incentives involved. Everyone wants to maximize their economical value, and there are players basically coming in to also benefit from this economical value. So just keep in mind when you're entering the real estate ecosystem, that there are teams, there are businesses involved, there are many parties involved. Each party might take a commission from you, and you as an investor, which you're right here, you need to understand how the relationship between the brokers work, because the seller might come with the broker. And a tip and a way around this is that if your investor broker, and if you find out your broker basically is on your side, he's on your side and helps you, and he's actually on your team and tries to negotiate against this guy over here, that's where you need to help him. Like, as an investor, what's his incentive? Again, let's go back to that. What's his incentive? He wants more leads, referrals, so he can make more deals in order to get more commission and feel successful, right? So as an investor, you should give him that if he's actually on your team, because what usually happens here are the teams. Here's the team, because they're in business for maybe 20 years and you're just a one-time guy. Unless you're an investor and you can keep on going and over again with this guy. So this is basically how the incentives and the dynamics and all work. So in summary, we talked about the ecosystem dynamics. How does the ecosystem work? What are the players' incentives, the different types of player and their incentives? And also we talked about the micro and macro teams. Just keep these in mind whenever you're entering any ecosystem, not just the real estate ecosystem, but I just specified it here for the real estate ecosystem, and ask those 3 questions that I posted, that I had on one of the slides, which was, what are the incentives, who are the teams, and what is the overall dynamics when entering any ecosystem. So in next live streams, I'm going to talk about the analysis. Basically, you found the real estate, how are you going to analyze and do your own research and get the numbers and calculate your return on investment for that certain real estate, and decide whether it's a good real estate to buy or should you look at another one. So thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please press the like button and subscribe. That's all I ask for. Thank you very much, and hope to see you on next live stream.